I would like to introduce our Theologian of the Day, the wonderful Sister Judy Kramer.
I asked them just to introduce me as summer one, because that's what I am. I'm just taking a learn to see what's going on here. But I think if maybe you want some background, I have a very checkered background, which is very strange. Actually, I got my bachelor's degree at College of St. Scholastica in Duluth, and then I got my master's here at St. John's in Collegeville. So I've been around the country, but it's interesting. I think that maybe religious sisters and brothers and monks, and particularly those of us who belong to religious communities, have tried very hard to show what we could do to best use the money and the funds that we have. The reason I went to St. Scholastica is because that summer up at St. Scholastica, they needed a teacher in biology. And in my community at the time, there was a terrific biology teacher who had a master's degree. So they said, if you come and teach at our college here at St. Scholastica, we'll take 2 of your younger sisters and they can come tuition free. So all the way through. The reason I got to St. John's College for my master's degree, I had been in Chile for 7 years. And the seasons are totally turned around. So I came back in December at the end of our school year, and I talked to our prioress. I said, I don't know what you're going to do with me, but I'm not ready to go back into the classroom because I don't know if voy a hablar inglés o español. So she said, I think you should go to St. John's and start your master's. I said, I don't want a master's degree. And she said, I think you want a master's degree. You get started. So I did. So there's been that kind of change. And you may notice I've been a little hesitant in saying where I'm from. Actually, and I mentioned to a few of you, that there was a time when there were several independent Benedictine monasteries, and I belong to one in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. St. Bean Monastery was there for over 100 years, an independent monastery, but founded from St. Joseph, Minnesota, founded from St. Ben's. So as we became smaller and smaller and smaller, we got, at one time there were 108 sisters in our community, and we were down to 29. And it was time to do something. And many of you have met our sister Michaela, who was the prioress who said, I think it's time to merge. I think it's time to say, we need to put our resources, our money into something like this for vocations. We need to gather together the people that are there with like needs. So that's what happened. So actually right now, as of 3 years ago, I'm a member of St. Benedict Monastery, but I'm still in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, because I'm teaching there at the Central Catholic High School. But you didn't come to hear all that. But I just to prove that I have a checkered past. What my topic is today is subsidiarity and economic justice, which is very strange. Subsidiarity means you need to include all the people that you're dealing with. You need to go to the lowest level. We probably say in language of Catholic social teaching the idea of the common good. Everybody gets included in what's going on. And as I look back on my life, I've lived through some interesting examples of the common good, and I want to share some of that with you. And today, as some of our friends are going to the legislature, I just read an article last week that said politics is a vocation. And unfortunately, many of our politicians have lost track of the fact that they're supposed to be thinking of the common good. They're supposed to be thinking about everybody getting a piece of what's going on. And that's not happening. That's why the voice of the church is becoming louder and louder and louder. We hope it isn't going to be combative, because then we'll get no place. But let me give an example. At a very early age, my grandfather came from Germany. And I think maybe many of you can go back 2 or 3 generations and not a whole lot more, and you will have roots in another country. That's another reason that the church is extremely interested in what we're calling immigration reform. We need to reform the way we let people come in, become citizens, and know what's going on, participate, and they themselves include people in the common good. Well, my story goes back to my grandfather, who came from the old country, came from Germany. And at his home, they always had a vineyard and an orchard. So Grandpa did that. But Grandpa liked a little drink now and then. So with his wine, with the grapes, he would always be sure he made some wine. And with the apples, he would make cider. And you know, if cider stands long enough, it becomes vinegar. Well, there was a very early tug of war I can recall in my family. Always in the fall, Grandma would start grumping that Grandpa drank up all the cider before it became vinegar, and she didn't have enough vinegar to make pickles. Well, that would become an issue, and so she would complain to my mother and my aunts and uncles. Leo drank all the cider again, and there's none of it. So every year somebody would go out and buy Grandma a gallon of vinegar. But that didn't settle the problem. That did not settle the problem. They were just taking care of the moment, seeing that Grandma got a gallon of vinegar to make the pickles. That's what we do so often. That happened in my life, and I was not aware that this was going on. But in the middle 70s, and I know I go back quite a ways, there was a call from Pope Paul VI at the time, who thought things were going great in the United States, and he said, I wish every religious community would send 10% of their members to Central or South America to help the church get on. The church in Central and South America is an honest church, but it is a very poor church. And we looked quite rich to the Pope. So the Pope said, well, what happened? I was from a rather small community. And so in one of our big meetings, they said, who would like to go and help out in South Pacific? I said, well, I would. Well, how were they going to send one person all alone? So we hooked up with Benedictine sisters in Duluth. And at that time, they were working in Antofagasta, Chile. So I went to Antofagasta, Chile, and joined the Benedictines who were there. But at that time, there was something wild going on that I did not understand before I got there. I knew there were problems, but at that time, and I went to the northern section of the country. You know, Chile is very skinny and long. I was in the northern section of the country where the great copper mines are. And the Atacama section from Montana had gone down to Chuquicamata, and they had increased the open pit mining. It's the largest open pit mining in the world. They dug deeper and wider and went down. And as they did that, they invited many of the local Chileans from that northern section to work in the mines. And what happened is many of the kids learned English. The mining company opened a school, a clinic, they had several stores, all that sort of thing. And the people, the Chileans who worked there, got to be looked up to as a special class of people. They earned dollars and not escudos, as the rest of the children. Dollars were worth a great deal if you could sell them, because that was a solid kind of currency. The kids learned English. I was working in a Catholic school in the city of Antofagasta that was owned and run by the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, that's an order of priests out of Canada. And they had worked with the sisters at Duluth in some of their schools, so they had invited the sisters down, 8-10 years before that. So my community decided to join them. And when I got there, my superior wanted me to know, so I had 21 credits from the local university in Spanish. I spent 6 months in Mexico learning Spanish, so I arrived speaking. But the first thing the Chilean kids said to me, no cantas el español como lo hacen en México. Don't sing your Spanish like they do in Mexico. Talk like we do. They speak much flatter Spanish. There are dialects. There are ways that you can tell where someone's from. So the first thing the kids did was scold me. Don't speak like the Mexicans. Talk like we do. But it was very interesting in that the kids that were the best students in the class that I had came from Chuquicamata. They had had English class. And they said, you know, our country is getting really, really upset that you gringos have created a special class of us in Chuquicamata. We get paid in dollars. We can buy things at American stores. We have English in school. And we like the gringos. Well, I was beginning to feel something of this pull back and forth. This goes on in many, many countries, that there's this pull. Well, finally one day, one of the other teachers told me, don't go downtown after school tonight. Go downtown that up. But I didn't. But the next day in the paper, there was a huge demonstration. And the headlines were, Chile se pone los pantalones largos. Chile puts on long pants. In other words, we've become big people. We're taking more than 50% of the credit and of the money that comes out of the mines. Well, at school those days, there were all kinds of discussions among the kids themselves. And one of the kids said, you know, When the gringos came, they brought new equipment, new machinery. They brought people that knew how to run it. There were some executives who came in, but they had white shirts and ties on, but they didn't care if they got their hands dirty. They went down into the mines. They showed us how to fix the machines. They were not afraid to get their hands dirty or do work. This is good. This is very good. This sounds very American, doesn't it? So that tension continues back and forth. What are we doing? What are we doing with the forward things that we're able to do in our country? And were we actually ruining the economy of Chile, particularly the northern section, by siphoning off an amount of that? Copper was big. Anytime you do a lot of wiring, copper is very, very important. Copper is the gold of South America at this time, and there are mines. So we kept thinking, what is going to happen? Well, eventually the country was brought to its knees by what you would call food insecurity, and you've heard about that. Chile is a long, skinny country, and the breadbasket of Chile is the central part, where they can grow wheat and fruit and all kinds of things. But in the northern part, it's arid, desert. And the common food there, you never have a meal without rice, because rice doesn't spoil. You can transport rice, you don't need it to be refrigerated, and dry beans. So what happened is that eventually the people from the other political parties in that said, we're going to paralyze the trucking industry so they can't get food that goes to the north or to the very, very south, which is very, very cold, where they also can't grow anything. They devised something called the miguelitos, which were little, very sharp white things, and they throw them on the highway. And most truckers own their own rigs. And after they had had 4 or 5 flat tires, they said, you know what? I'm not doing another run north or south. I'm not going to wreck my rig. So there became a food shortage in the extreme north where I lived and in the south. So the country was brought to its knees over this. And there was a huge, almost a civil war. Some of our graduates were what we call desaparecidos. They would disappear in the night and never came home. I had one family that their son was studying law, and they evidently thought that he was an organizer for the wrong party. Anytime you get to violence, it's going to be tit for tat. I'm going to take one of our men, we're going to take one of yours. That's what happens. And they simply disappeared. The rumor was that they take some of these guys out in a plane, drop them over the ocean, and they never heard from them again. But what did happen is there was a civil war, and the United States came in and took sides, unfortunately. The arms, the guns, were hidden in our cemeteries. Mausoleums that are supposed to be places of peace, of rest, became places where we were hiding dynamite and guns and that sort of thing. Eventually, they called on the army to come in and take over. Isn't that always the way they go? And Chile underwent one of the most brutal dictatorships that ever was. Pinochet came in. But at that moment, the church stood up strong. There were magnificent bishops, and the Archbishop in Antofagasta, he started kind of an underground newspaper that he would put out through the parishes, not through the dioceses, but through the parishes. He let people know where they could help one another. So that was one of the first times the sisters, and there were not too many sisters in this city, Antofagasta, maybe 18, 20 of us, and we would meet once a month. And the dues to come was that you would bring at least 4 kilos of rice. Now, a kilo is a little more than 2 pounds. So anytime you'd see a sister, she'd be carrying a bag along with her. And at our meetings, there was always some, they wouldn't let us foreigners get involved in that. But the native sisters from Chile or Bolivia were forever helping the family get across the border. They were forever helping, and our job was to help nourish them with some food. So I saw early on the terrible effects that there could be if you don't include everybody in what is going on in the system that's there. Subsidiarity means that somehow or another we respect the cultures of other people. We try to inform ourselves. I remember the second day of school, and I went to school at San Jose. 3 of the kids were standing there, and they had a big, well, it looked like a hard winter pear, and they were throwing it against the wall. And I thought, well, this is weird. What a way to waste food. So I said to one of the, in my best Spanish at the time, well, no, I said, I'm going to eat this. These was a hard fruit called a membrillo, and you have to soften it up. You have to pound it against something to bruise it so that you can eat it. It gets soft enough to eat. We have to be very careful if we judge other people by our standards. They were not wasting food. They were preparing to eat that food. We get so mixed up with that sort of thing. I was very interested by the remark of the bishop on Sunday night when he said he wants young people to be stretched. Don't forget the element that we need to have a relationship personally with God, but at the same time, there needs to be this concern for others, that we go back and forth. That's one of the lessons I think our very rich nation needs to learn. Yes, we need to take care of the poor and hungry in our own country, and we're doing a good job of that. And most people are finding great satisfaction at that. But unfortunately, we do our good work according to the models that we have. By that I mean, yesterday we were out at Rockville and we were giving out the snacks, and one kid grumbled because they said, you have to get in a line. You want line, get in line. And one kid grumbled to another in Spanish. He said, this is just like school. You see what we're doing? We're using the models that we're aware of. Well, it just has to be like school right now. That's the only way we can ensure that everybody gets a choice, that we're doing, that we're considering doing. Another thing, I was on a committee one time with a judge, and she said, I'm like the big mama around here. Kids that their parents couldn't handle, were in trouble in school, got picked up by the police, they end up in front of me. So the idea, the sooner people would learn that there are certain rules we have to follow, the better. That's what we mean by subsidiarity and economic justice. If Grandpa had been a little more, he was muy terrible, he was very stubborn. If Grandpa had given up and saved maybe a gallon of wine for Grandma, that would not have come up every year. If we had been a bit more circumspect in Chile, perhaps we could have avoided those bloody years of dictatorship in that country. And that story is repeated over and over. And you think I'm talking about the Middle East right now, don't you? You think I'm talking about Afghanistan. There are parties there who have not gotten along for centuries. Our job is trying to get them to talk things over, to agree upon something. Let me tell you something that happened to me just this winter. I try to help out at the homeless shelter in the city where I live, and I go in with the parish team. And one of those cold nights, we were short on team that went in. And of course, as you go into a homeless shelter, the first thing, somebody has to have you go through the breathalyzer. You got to be real careful for the safety. You will understand that, the safety. And they don't like the person who does the breathalyzer. Well, I didn't have that job. I usually ask to be sent to the kitchen. But that night, there's usually 3 women, and you have, each one has 2 kinds of clipboards. And on those clipboards, you need to pick who needs to get up early, who perhaps has a little job delivering papers, who needs to wash their clothes, who needs to take a shower. So you need a list of all those people, and that can change every night. So there were 6 clipboards with that kind of information on. And you would have to have their name and what it was they would need. You schedule the people for a shower so everybody doesn't go at the same time. Who needs to get up at 5:30 and so forth. Well, I was sitting there with these 6 clipboards. And I thought, oh no. And the people, it was cold, bitterly cold. And the people started pouring in. And as they came in, there was this one lady. Now, there are many people who show up at the homeless shelter day after day after day until they get a situation someplace else. And this one, and I should not call her a floozy, but one woman came in, had this hat on with flower on, was cold. And she walked in and she said, "Hiya there, Butch, how the hell are you? What you been doing today?" I was here. And she was completely inappropriate. And I thought, oh no, there we go. And she looked over at me, and I was sitting there with this stack of 6 clipboards. I was kind of shuffling. She looked at me, and in a totally different tone of voice, she said to me, "You need help." And I said, "Yes, I do." She said, "You know, I know all these people by their first name. I said, "Come on, sit down, help me." So she took 4 of the clipboards, and I kept 2 of them. Her whole tone of voice changed with all the people that came in. Mr. Tom, what did you do today? Lily, how did you stay warm? Did you finish reading your book? Her tone was totally concerned about the other homeless who came in. 3 different times in the course of the evening, we were there until about 9:30, she'd say to me, do you want a cup of coffee? Do you? I knew I wanted a cup of coffee, but I kept saying yes. So she'd get up and get me a cup of coffee and bring it to me. At the end of the evening, she said to me, you know, they had pizza tonight for supper. I really wanted some, but I just had a peanut butter sandwich because it went faster, because I wanted to help you. This is subsidiarity. It only dawned on me later. You betcha I needed it. I didn't know all their names. She knew everyone's names. She very kindly asked them what they had done during the day. That's subsidiarity. That's asking people, the people who are involved, what do you think about that? I had another problem this year. I was bullied by a 6th grader, and I want to tell you about her. This 6th grader, I said, you know, I better change his name. John, I said, John, you cannot be a deacon. I want you right up here in front. No, he said, I'm not going to come. I said, yes, you are. I told you I want you up here in the front seat. Bright kid, very bright kid. And he would have excellent things to add and tell me. So I said, no, you'll come up here. Well, he said, I'll come up here. But he said, I'll get you. He said, I'm not going to take my medicine for ADD, and you'll be sorry. And one of the other kids said, have you seen him when he doesn't take his medicine? No, I have not. You're going to be sorry. Well, I thought, I'm being bullied. I'm being bullied by a 6th grader. So after class, I said, John, I need to see you for a minute. So I told him, I said, I feel like I'm being bullied. No, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. You're threatening me with, well, he said, I won't do it. I'll take my meds. But he said, if I stay awake and I behave, can I go back to the back of the room? Okay, here's the compromise. He was proposing the compromise. And I said, well, yes. I get, if you sit up your knees for a whole week, then we'll try you back. And he was very tall. He didn't fit inside the room. Oftentimes, when we're talking about subsidiarity, we have to be willing to give a little. We have to be rational about what we ask people to do. But we need to consult the people that we are serving. For example, many times there are groups that I know there's one in my hometown, that they got a little fund together. They have like $5,000, which sounds like a lot of money to you and me. But they're renting that, they're letting people use that money $1,000 at a time, but no interest. So what they're doing, they simply ask, what do you need the money for? When can you pay it back so they can keep this amount in the kitty to loan out to somebody else? Well, their latest big struggle is they do have a banker on the board of advisors, and there are 2 people from the group that's trying to help out. And the group that's trying want to bring the first woman who got her loan, they want to bring her on board as a board member. And the banker doesn't want her there. Why not? She's going to stand for very lenient kinds of payback. She herself had to ask for an extension at the end of the month. She couldn't pay the $1,000 back. But they said, you know what, could you meet with somebody that will help you budget? Yes, I would. That's what we mean by negotiation. That's what we're talking about, what's going on. We need both. Another thing I want to mention here, just because I hope you'll find it amusing. There's a university very near where I live, which is Stout Technical Institute. And sometimes people will say, when in doubt, go to Stout. But Stout has become a technical institute that is extremely interested in doing things in saving the environment. The son of a friend of mine is getting his master's degree in packaging. Now by that they mean they want to find ways to package goods that will save the goods, maintain it, but not violate their certain set of rules of being biodegradable, something that will not harm the rest of the world. They're working hard on that. Biodegradable packaging, imagine that. So that's what they're doing. But now the point is, here at St. Anne's and St. John's, you're working on the level of the intellectual. And we look to you for something. That's why I have to smile. Someone told us the other day that Francis is the environmental pope. And I had spent quite some time with this book on Benedict XVI, the environmental pope. Now, by this we mean Benedict is very much given to thought, and then he writes about it later. He'll say, now what happened? What did we learn? That's why we keep asking you here, what did you learn? How do you feel? Well, what did you learn? And this is what Benedict was trying to do. Some people say, unfortunately, that always makes the church 10, 15 years behind what happened. But we need time to reflect. And Benedict has come out with some marvelous things that are there. Just like you at St. Ben, St. John's, and liberal arts universities, you're supposed to come up with the ideas. You're supposed to read the books. You're supposed to, and the students at the polytechnic universities, they're supposed to put it into practice. They're supposed to do. You will not be surprised if I'll tell you one of the classes in fiber they were studying at South this year had a contest on making clothing out of, you guessed it,
Duct tape?
duct tape. They had a contest on making clothes out of duct tape. And you would be amazed at some of the things they came up with. But this is what we need both. The bishop kept telling us that the other night. Well, at the Polytechnic School, they have, now this is actually a bag with chick feed, poultry feed. And it's a bag. But at Stout, one of the girls who works in fiber lined it with a lovely picture of chickens inside, a chicken coop, all the rest, a pocket, some kind of, it's almost a flannel. So I gave this to Sister Michaela for her Christmas present this year. And I put in some Wisconsin products, some cranberries, some cheese, and a couple of beers. Because I wanted it to look like it came from Wisconsin. See what's going on. Okay? So, what I need to say, you need to be creative when you start thinking about what is my role going to be. In last week's America magazine, there's an article by a bishop called Political Vocations. Ask your politicians today if they consider their job a vocation, a call from God. And one other thing I just cannot go without, you have heard of Malala? Malala has her book is out. Have you read I Am Malala? A beautiful book about a girl from Afghanistan who almost gave her life for education for women. The Taliban shot her through the head. She's in England now, and they helped her write the book. A beautiful, beautiful book. Okay. And I want to be honest with my project that we need to consult the basis. We need to consult the people we work with. And the other day, when someone was talking about fracking, I noticed a reaction from Dean. Dean is from Rochester, and I told Dean, can you wait a little bit? And I have 5 minutes left. And I've asked Dean to talk a little bit to you. Now, you're aware that fracking is natural gas. We in the Midwest are aware of what's going on. I don't know if the rest of the United States does. It means it's source of fuel for us, and we will not be dependent on the Middle East. That's what went ahead and pushed all this. But young people have some questions about fracking. One of the sisters mentioned to us yesterday at our luncheon what it has done to the societies in North and South Dakota. The big box stores have moved in, all kinds of Walmarts and Walgreens and all the rest, and the mom and pop grocery stores that were there for years and years are disappearing. The big stores are undercutting their prices. So she said, our whole political people area is changing. But Dean, I'm going to share with you and give you 5 minutes of my time that I have left some of your concerns about fracking in the Midwest. And then I have a closing line.
Okay, so as you know, as she mentioned, I know about frac sand mining. I'm sure a lot of you don't. It's a very big issue right now. Well, what frac sand is, it's silica sand, and what they do is they buy a patch of land and they bulldoze all of the dirt off the land and they put it in this pile for all the while they mine the sand. And what happens to this dirt is all the microbes in it, it all dies. So that dirt just becomes useless, and they promise to make golf courses and parks over the land when they're done. But they can't do that since the soil is all dead and nothing can grow on it. Another bad thing is when they get the sand, they use dynamite to get the sand, which causes the silica sand to become airborne, and it stays in your lungs if you breathe it in. It doesn't come out, and it can cause cancer too. They purify the sand with carcinogens, and they transport the sand out on big trucks and trains, which destroys roads because it's hundreds of trucks a day over small roads. It cracks the roads and huge potholes, and it destroys local transportation. I first learned about this earlier this year when someone came to my religion class, and they gave a talk about frac sand, and it struck me because how can you do something to that the environment and not care, and why doesn't our government care about it right now? I know that some laws have been passed to do further research on the harmful effects of it, and that frac sand has been delayed a lot, but it still needs to be heavily there needs to be a lot of laws put in place before it becomes safe. Thank you for your time.
Well, I saw a documentary once about fracking, how like affects, like when they put the chemicals down, it gets into people's well water around, and so it ends up poisoning the people, and then they
Yes. Sorry, I forgot to add that. Thank you.
I was director of buildings and grounds at our monastery for some years, and one year the head maintenance man retired, and one of his jobs was he was certified as a wastewater and water management gentleman. You have to get a certain number of credits. We had our own sewage system on the plant because we were out in the country driveways, but it was totally a pond, and with water and sunlight, it is purified and returns way down to the earth again. Well, when Ed retired, I said, Ed, what are we going to do for somebody's certification? You have to be certified with the state. Well, he looked at me and said, you could do that. Yes. All the mechanics and the physics. So I went to a class, 39 gentlemen and me, 40 hours, we put it in. We met again 6 months later to go over the thing, and I passed. I could not believe that I passed. So I became the first sister who was certified as a wastewater management worker in the state of Wisconsin, which I was very proud of. And a couple of years before that, my mother had been at St. John's University when I graduated with my degree in theology. Mother was here, she was thrilled. So after I finished up with the wastewater management and I got my certification, I called Mother and I said, Mother, I got it, I passed first time around. And I said, you know, I'm more proud of my certification than I am of my master's degree from St. John's. She had 3 words for me. Shame on you. Mother was of the other side. She had not finished high school herself. So she felt anything intellectual was far above anything that would have to do with water or wastewater. I learned a lot about water and about wastewater. And my closing thought for you today, you've heard a great deal about the Spirit moving into us. In the beginning of the creation, I love the story. God picked up this little mud man and he breathed his soul into it. And then that comes back to us in the New Testament, where at the resurrection, the Lord comes to the people, his apostles, and it said he breathed on them. Now, you're aware what happens if somebody needs CPR, something like that they cannot. You cannot, if you just get breath breathed into you and you don't expel that breath, you're dead. So I would dare say to you, with all the things that have been breathed into you this week, these 2 weeks, in fact, if you don't breathe something out, that message will be dead in you. Remember, they have to spank the baby in the old times so the baby would take a breath on its own. Now it's going to be your turn to take a breath. The Spirit has breathed on you. You need to react. You need to expel that air, to do something. Please be thinking about that as you start thinking about your projects, because you are making a very positive difference. Thank you so much.